Mina Deth, Jack Brash, and Mrs. Walpole in The Case of the Six Bells Haunting. Mina Deth went out to the boat launch where she and her companions had arrived earlier, and just like Mr. Baker had said, there was cell service if one stood on the boat launch's very edge. She called Angela D'Amelio. "Good morning, Kick-Ass Games," answered the receptionist in his AM radio announcer voice. "It's Mina Deth," she said. "I need to talk to Angela." Angela answered. "Yes, Mina," Angela said, annoyed. "We aren't going to be able to do the live stream," said Mina. "Why?" Angela asked. "Normally this island is served by some kind of relay and has pretty good signal. The wireless modem would have been enough, but that went out and it's not going to be fixed until Monday," said Mina. "God damn it," said Angela, as if it was Mina's fault when Mina was only relaying what Mr. Baker had passed on from the local branch of the telecom company. "How are you calling me then?" Angela asked. "If I go out to the boat launch, I get 2 bars for voice but no data," said Mina. "The what?" Angela asked. "Boat launch. It's an island, Angela. It's where the little boat that brought us here docked," said Mina. "Like a marina? I thought this place was supposed to be remote. Is it crawling with tourists? It's just supposed to be the 3 of you out there, and the house." "Not like a marina, Angela. Like it's just us and the caretaker, and I'm standing on a small wooden platform," said Mina. "Whatever. I don't know about maritime stuff," said Angela. Mina thought to herself that she didn't know about maritime stuff either, but presumed most people knew a boat launch was not automatically a marina sprawling with restaurants and nightclubs and tourists. But Angela D'Amelio was Angela D'Amelio. "We can still do the special, it just won't be a live stream," said Mina. "Okay," said Angela, oddly not pissed off. "You're okay with that?" Mina asked. "Honestly, Mina, I wanted to cut sponsorship to all the paranormal YouTubers a while ago. It was actually the marketing team who have a fondness for you and your pals. They wanted you to have this last hurrah, I guess you'd call it. I was expecting all of you to fall flat on your faces as a flounder anyway. Now I'm just absolutely positive that you will." "Angela, I need this to work. I don't have anything but my channel," said Mina. "That's not true, Mina. You could go back to OnlyFans.com and sell more feet pics," Angela said coldly. OnlyFans was the last word Mina heard, though. Some environmental factor cut out the signal it had permitted, but Mina knew what it was Angela was referring to. Mina often had done her videos over the years, especially the ones where she covered legends, from her porch at home, and anytime she was barefoot, there would be some notes from people in the comments section, yes, both men and women, about a special appreciation for her feet. Now, they were not the most toxic or ugly statements in the comment section on YouTube by far, but Mina didn't appreciate them. But as her revenue from Patreon, Ko-Fi, sponsors, and video monetization dwindled, she had sold some pictures on OnlyFans under an alias. It turned out there were not that many people interested in her feet when they didn't realize they were the feet of Mina Deth. Someone online realized one of the pictures had an original piece of art in the background, a piece of art Mina's late brother had done when he was in art school. It was something that often appeared in Mina's videos, and now it appeared in one of the feet pictures. As a result, she was found out and shamed on social media. Mina put her iPhone back into her pocket and began walking towards Six Walls. Six Walls was the name of the house where her paranormal investigation for the night was going to be, and we will meet Six Walls shortly. But as Mina walks up from the boat launch, let's finish meeting her, shall we? Mina Deth, it should be noted, was indeed her birth name. Technically Prudence Wilhelmina Deth, and my reader will pause while I quickly address the potential listener, should this ever be an audiobook, to note that it is spelled D-E-T-H without an A. Readers, please rejoin us again now if you would. When she first got into vlogging, she had thought of using the name Prue Deth, but Mina Deth was much better, and it was in fact the name she used in her own life. 10 years ago, Mina had been one of the most successful paranormal and ghost investigation YouTubers around. Occasionally she did some goth fashion videos and music reviews, but she loved the ghost videos and so did her audience. She did on-site investigations, though it was more about documenting picturesque and spooky places than anything else. She didn't go around with a magnetometer or try to channel the dead. She mostly told the legends and would then do shorter video drops through the week covering folklore. The truth was, lately, the interest in the entry-level paranormal stuff among the public was dropping. Conspiracy theories, New Age manifestation techniques, and the like were the thing. And on the other end, it seemed that a good portion of the public who would have considered ghosts a possibility a few years ago were no longer willing to look at it as a possibility. Inside, Mina was beginning to have doubts about the paranormal herself. She was starting to think that perhaps there was nothing but a world of matter. If that was true, it meant all the times she thought her brother had been watching over her was nothing but a trick of her own brain. During the pandemic, she vowed she wouldn't lean into the conspiracy theories. When she saw people dying from the virus and its denial, violence in the streets from attempts to deny the election results, and an increasing overlap between conspiracy theory and political extremism, she wondered if lending credence to theories about ghosts in the afterlife, something she was once a believer in but was now sliding slowly with grief toward skepticism on, she hoped was not pouring fuel onto the deadly fire of misinformation. The tiny estate on which Six Walls House, the caretaker's lodge, and a few service buildings stood was occupied tonight by 4 persons: 3 paranormal investigators and the caretaker, Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker will not be doing much in the story other than handing a set of keys over to our protagonists and delivering a tidbit of information here and there. This is not to say he is not a fully realized person. With my blessing, dear reader, write an interquel story of Mr. Baker in which he journeys the world and finds himself, perhaps even has a bit of romance. But sadly, dear Mr. Baker is for our purposes more a plot device than a character. Now, as to the other 2 paranormal investigation YouTubers, we should note they were Mina's and each other's competition until Angela D'Amelio, their contact at Kick-Ass Games, said all of their sponsorships would be pulled unless they came together for an amazing live stream on Halloween from 6 Walls. None of them would have minded not having to awkwardly find a way to work sponsorship for Kick-Ass Games' crappy mobile microtransaction games into their videos, but like Mina, the well for paranormal YouTubers of their type was drying up. Mrs. Walpole was a British lady of the old school. She was in her 60s and quite fit, but looked 80, and this was actually a benefit to her audience appeal. She had started out taking historical walks through different parts of Europe, mostly the UK and France. She liked to show off her very fine French when she could, but more and more popularity came from the haunted sites she visited. She leaned into her old English lady of yesteryear vibe a bit, but it wasn't far off from her authentic self. Mrs. Walpole, whose first name is Laura, but shall only be known as Mrs. Walpole, was ever optimistic. She was not in touch with how much her revenue stream had diminished. She was sure that tonight was going to be a rousing success and did not view the other 2 paranormal YouTubers as rivals at all, and was thrilled to be teaming up, quote, like Batman and those other characters he teams up with. Jack Brash, whose name was made up for social media, unlike Mina, his real name being Jack Hausman, was a bit more of a departure than the other 2. He was known to go through the woods and abandoned buildings, equipped with night vision and audio recorders to capture EVPs, many of which he had dramatically revealed on his show, and all of which he said proved the paranormal. He looked like a frat boy who someone had given serious intensity pills to, but his heart was good. He truly believed he had provided people with proof of life after death, and he also thought that he had helped people besieged by ghosts and demons to be free of their woes. This he found fulfilling. On top of the dwindling income and fewer subscribers every month, there were the issues of his health. He was still a fit dude, but respiration, aches, pains, and fatigue, as if all his body systems were slowly giving out at some synchronized rate, plagued him. He was not quite 50, and so these ailments were premature. Jack thought it was his lifetime of exposure to extra-dimensional entities and spirits. His doctors thought it was his years of poor sleep and breathing in dust and mold without a respirator. But it didn't matter. He was sick and tired more often than he was well, and that was what brought him to feel so low most of the time. There was to have been a 4th investigator with him that night, Peter Winston. Peter was a medium who channeled the dead as well as angels, aliens, and ancient Atlanteans. Mina didn't care for him as he regularly talked about the Illuminati and ancient aliens building the pyramids. He had intended to bring some crystal trinkets with him to the investigation at Six Walls, 3 green crystals on necklace chains that looked like something you could buy on Etsy, but that he claimed would allow new ways to interact with the dead. They were a rare item invented by a Chinese alchemist, Peter claimed. Angela had wanted Peter to be on this investigation as well. However, Peter and his partner, Lloyd Light, were on a podcast a few weeks back. It should be noted Peter had claimed to have been cured of cancer by a Mexican alternative medicine clinic that was presently under investigation for fraud, but he still regularly endorsed the clinic. About 10 days before this Halloween special, Peter and Lloyd, or rather their bodies, were on a podcast. The Archangel Michael was channeling through Peter, and Ra Tut, Lord of Atlantis, was channeling through Lloyd. Archangel Michael gently reminded Ra Tut that it was because of the negative Martian aliens that humans lost their higher dimensional awareness, when Ra Tut seemed to disagree that it was in fact the Hollow Earth Lizardmen who had robbed humanity of this gift. The 2 ascended masters began to bicker, with Archangel Michael slowly taking on a Long Island accent as his agitation rose, and Ra Tut definitely getting a Tennessee drawl as he quarreled with his fellow karmic lord. Finally, Ra Tut let it slip that Peter had emailed Lloyd a while back to ask for his help in figuring out what kind of cancer I could say I have, and no one would be able to tell if I really had it or not. Authorities soon had Peter Winston arrested for fraud in relation to his endorsement of the Mexican cancer clinic. But his 3 magic necklaces were here. Somehow they'd been delivered to Six Walls, and now Jack was putting one on. "Bro, these are intense," he said, steadying himself as if he were about to lose balance. "Jack, you aren't going to wear those, are you?" asked Mina. "Yes, my dear, perhaps we'd best not invoke that kook and his unpleasantness," said Mrs. Walpole gently. Mina and Jack both looked at her, surprised she referred to Peter Winston as a kook. "Well, I think we shall all agree there are degrees of kook, and Mr. Winston exceeds any of us," said Mrs. Walpole. Jack stepped slightly out of his media persona. "Nobody knows Winston was bringing these here. We can wear them during the investigation, as long as we don't bring up his name," he said. He offered one to Mina and one to Mrs. Walpole. When Mrs. Walpole happily took one and put it on around her neck, Mina felt obliged to as well, but said, "I'll wear this, but on the condition that we don't bring up Winston or his Chinese alchemy story. We'll wear these things but not talk about them. Deal?" Mina asked. "Wonderful," said Mrs. Walpole, with a level of cheer that should be reserved for hearing a loved one is getting married or expecting a baby. "Deal," said Jack, "but if I can't talk about that, our intro is going to need to be all the more intense to make up for it." Jack hit the record button on one of the cameras. "Tonight, we'll be cut off from the world in the infamous Six Walls mansion, in a remote no-man's land between Ireland and Scotland," he began. "The island is easily part of Scotland, dear. We're only a few miles from Scotland. We're quite far from Ireland, actually. It's not a no-man's land. It's quite a popular wedding rental, you know," said Mrs. Walpole, her cheer barely abated. Jack's movie announcer intensity was dissipated by her remark, but it was then Mr. Baker entered. "I wanted to check if you needed anything before I left," he asked. "You're going to navigate those dark waters out there by night?" Jack asked with incredible excitement. "Oh, it's perfectly fine to take a boat at night, but no, I meant I'm going to be going to the caretaker's house is all," said Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker did not know why the Board of Trustees for Six Walls had agreed to let these ghost investigators in, but he did what he was told. He supposed it was a chance to make some money in the off-season. "Is there anything you can tell us about the legend of Lady Catherine not commonly known?" asked Mrs. Walpole. "No," said Mr. Baker. "I know the same as you. She fell to her death from the cliffs, supposedly looking for a rope. Her lover had left her to climb down, but mistook a root for something, grabbed onto that and fell. He found her body, etc., etc., he said, bored. "I learned it from a book, just like most people did. It's not something we emphasize. I can tell you it was called Astria House then, not Six Walls. The walls were built when Napoleon invading Britain was still a real possibility, centuries after her time, if she existed at all, that is. And then the walls were torn down in the 50s to make room for the golf course." "If she existed," said Mrs. Walpole, genuinely upset. "Now, see here, Mr. Baker. She is thought to be one of the most routine ghosts known in the law, almost guaranteed to appear tonight as she does every 7th Halloween. Have you not seen her?" "Nope, I have not," said Mr. Baker. "How many years have you been here?" asked Mina. "5," he said. "Aha!" said Jack, as if he were Watson or Crick discovering the DNA molecule. "So you weren't here yet at her last appearance?" "Oh, how astute," said Mr. Baker. "But I worked with my predecessor, who'd been here since the 90s, and I worked with him for a year. He said he never saw her. Most likely because ghosts don't exist. Now, you have the keys, you know where the electrical panel is and how to use the backup generator. If the internet does bounce back, the router will turn green from yellow, but I doubt it will. So you'll excuse me. I do prefer to spend my evening hours by myself," he said. "Thank you," said Mina. And with that, Mr. Baker left. "Mina," said Jack dejectedly, "maybe you want to record the intro." They mostly had their phones and GoPro rigs to record themselves, but in the lobby of Six Walls, a sort of makeshift command center had been made, with a non-functioning modem which was to have facilitated the live stream and 2 professional-grade cameras. Mina positioned one of the cameras so it showed a good view of one of the couches and asked Jack and Mrs. Walpole to get into frame, imagining herself in the center. When Mina was satisfied with the shot, she got into frame. She hit the record button on the remote. "I'm Mina Deth, coming to you from the famous Six Walls mansion on..." She hit stop. "Wait, what is the island actually called?" "Oh, it's just called Six Walls Island," said Mrs. Walpole. "Okay," said Mina. She hit record again. "I'm Mina Deth, teamed up with Jack Brash and Mrs. Walpole for a Halloween night paranormal investigation that warranted us coming together. We've been granted first-time access to investigate the ghosts here at Six Walls House and Island. In 1639, Lady Catherine Astrea took advantage of her cruel husband, Lord Astrea, being away on the mainland, where he was assisting the local bishop with so-called hunting for witches on their Sabbath night. Lady Catherine's lover, a local man named Henry, was going to meet her on the far side of the island in a rowboat. Lady Catherine's servants, having at her instruction, left a climbing rope for her to make her way down the cliff face to the beach below to the secluded seaward side, where Henry would spirit her away to a new life. But in the dark, Lady Catherine mistook an overgrown root for the rope, and fell to her death. Now she's thought, in all the annals of hauntings, to be one of the most predictable phantom appearances, and our team means to capture her on film tonight." Mina hit stop on the remote. "That sucked," Mina said. "It was great," said Jack. "Well," said Mrs. Walpole, "I suppose we go and investigate the ghosts." Where does she appear?" asked Jack. "I don't know," asked Mina. "I must confess I don't either. These days I just Google what I need to know for an investigation on my phone when it's underway," said Mrs. Walpole. With no internet, and a quick interrogation of the lobby brochures, none of which mentioned anything about the ghost, instead focusing on local vacation activities or hotel spa add-on benefits, our trio decided that if they couldn't tell if Lady Catherine was supposed to appear inside the house, and if so, which room, or outside, the cliffs were as good a place to start as any. Only Mrs. Walpole's smart and properly tractioned orthopedic walking shoes were actually suited to the terrain. It having been a warm day, Mina had worn flip-flops, planning to change into a pair of sneakers, which she had not brought in her bag when they sailed to the island that morning. Jack was, however, the slowest of all. His stylish, heavy metal boots were made for looking cool, not practicality. The bottoms of them were absolutely flat, and he slipped on the wet grass once or twice, and so the group was reduced to Jack's maximum walking speed, which in scientific terms was not very fast at all. Mrs. Walpole was the only one who had brought a pocket flashlight, which did a much better job than a phone and illuminated the terrain well enough to see, and also, being she was the only one in sensible footwear, took the lead. When they were about 3 minutes into the walk, which would have been about a third away to the cliff, for it was not a far walk, Mina broke the silence. "Have either of you ever played any of the kick-ass game stuff?" asked Mina. "They're terrible," said Jack. "I hate doing that part of the video where I know I'm selling people to crap." Mrs. Walpole admonished them with a hush sound, and it very quickly became apparent she was not defending the worthiness of Kick-Ass Game's content, but was drawing attention to the unmistakable sobbing sound coming not from the cliffs, but back to the lobby and entryway of the house, where they had just left. The three looked at each other and began to make their way back to the house, Mrs. Walpole in the lead, Mina recording on video, and Jack having pulled some kind of device with an uncountable number of LEDs out of his pocket. Imagine, if you can, and as best you can, that you investigate a mysterious sound, like a woman sobbing, and when your eyes reach the source of the sound, there is a woman there. She's in 16th century clothing, she's transparent, not white, but her color is faded, partially toward the monochrome. A lifetime of incredible digital special effects in movies and games may make this not sound like much, but imagine you're seeing it in 3 dimensions with your own eyes, and you're not alone. Other people with you are clearly seeing it as well. If you can actually put yourself into this scenario, you'll get some idea what our 3 investigators felt as they entered the house. There was a good moment of stillness. Mrs. Walpole, her empathy toward the sorrow this being expressed having won out over her fear, spoke first. "Lady Catherine, we are friends," she said in a soothing tone. The ghost, if indeed that's what it was, looked up at Mrs. Walpole and screamed. Mrs. Walpole stepped back. The ghost took a step back and caught her hand to her breast as if an adrenaline rush had gone through her. Now Jack's device began to make a series of unpleasant sounds like a car alarm, and an air raid siren had a regrettable offspring, to which he screamed. This caught Mina's attention for a moment, and she feared the ghost would dissipate. "Jack, put that thing away," she started, but then noticed Jack's necklace. The green crystal was glowing. She looked quickly and saw Mrs. Walpole's was doing the same. She had only a moment to pull hers into her own vision and see it too was glowing before a flash like a camera bulb went off. When it cleared, the entry hall was furnished entirely differently and was lit only by candles. Jack and Mrs. Walpole were there. Lady Catherine was still there, but now appeared solid. Jack put his device in his pocket and reached for his phone. He began taking video, and was delighted Lady Catherine appeared on screen. "This is Jack Brash, and I am taking the most authentic and greatest ghost video of all ghost videos ever taken. I'm seeing a full-bodied apparition." And while talking, went right up to Lady Catherine, shoving the camera in her face. Fear gave way to annoyance of having her personal space so much invaded. Lady Catherine grabbed a cloth wall hanging of some kind and put it over Jack's head. "Spirit, in the name of Jesus Christ, the Virgin Mother, and all the saints, tell me what business keeps you from rest, and if none there be, then depart," Lady Catherine said. "Oh my," said Mrs. Walpole with great enthusiasm and a bit of a jump. "She's trying to lay him." "Come again?" said Mina. "Oh, sorry, dear, I didn't mean something sexual. In Lady Catherine's time, ghosts were thought to be quite material. You had to cover them up and even box with them a bit, then say a prayer. Then they must either leave or state their business. And she seems to be doing that to Jack right now." Jack managed to get the wall hanging off of himself, and being a vegan was disgusted it seemed to be some kind of animal skin. It was by now apparent to all persons in this room, Lady Catherine included, that however odd this evening was, everyone present was most likely a living mortal. "If not spirits or fairies you be, then tell me who you are. How is it you are a few moments ago like fog? Are you witches?" asked Lady Catherine. Now a more immediate concern hit Lady Catherine. She pulled from her side what looked like a flintlock pistol. Mina only noticed now she wore a holster of sorts over her dress. "My husband, he learned Henry is coming for me tonight." "Has he sent you?" she said. By the way she handled the sidearm, every indication was she knew how to use it. Mina carefully hit the video record button on her phone and took a selfie video. "Lady Catherine, we're from a very far away place, where things are very different," said Mina. She very carefully hit a few buttons and then turned the phone around so its screen was visible to Lady Catherine and played the video. "Lady Catherine, we're from a very far away place where things are very different," said the video version of Mina. Lady Catherine gasped. She lowered the pistol. "Come and sit then," said Lady Catherine. The 3 followed her to a parlor. "If you are not the dead, then I think you to be fairies, and if that you be, I would tell you, if you have come to punish a wife for leaving her husband, is a wife abused by her husband every day, who is married to a man with no love in his heart for her, a marriage she never agreed to. She seeks to leave and live a simple life with a good man. Does fairyland punish those who suffer already? She asked. We aren't fairies, said Mina. We are people, but we have knowledge sometimes of what is to come. Putting things right that once went wrong, muttered Jack to himself. Like Dr. Sam Beckett in Quantum Leap. Quick, a mirror! Who have I leapt into? Jack noticed a mirror on the other side of the parlor and surveyed himself in it, and seemed disappointed to see only his own familiar reflection. Is he well? Asked Lady Catherine. Jack is just Jack, said Mina. Mrs. Walpole took a deep breath, and her upbeat, tiptoe cheerio gave way to a measured and gravitas-laden tone. Lady Catherine, my companions and I are as surprised by this turn of events as you, and I am sure the shock you saw on our faces will tell you that. Furthermore, I will disclose we have knowledge that you intend to escape Astria House and the island tonight, which under your assumption we are fairies, you presumed we knew already. We did already know it, but that is not the reason. We are as much as of the race of Adam as you. I ask you as one gentlewoman to another, may my companions and I speak in private? Lady Catherine indulged by retreating to a corner of the room, allowing the ghost investigators to conference in whispers. Are we in the past? Have we time-traveled? Asked Mina. Most likely, said Mrs. Walpole, though I think there is a chance that we are in Lady Catherine's mind. Still, our course of action is the same. What do you mean? Asked Mina. We must see her safely to her boat and her lover. We cannot let this woman die. If we are in a mental representation, perhaps changing the events in her mind will allow her to transmigrate. And if we are in the past, well, I should suppose history's flow has already been polluted by our presence, said Mrs. Walpole. What about, like, a paradox? Asked Mina. She's right, Mina, Jack said, in something closer to his real voice. We can't just sit here and let that lady fall to her death. Mina nodded. That was not a possibility she could stomach either. Providence has brought us here, Lady Catherine, said Mrs. Walpole more loudly. We know you intend to climb down the southern cliffs tonight. I have in my present an instrument which will make a small amount of directed light. It can make your climb less dangerous, and we shall undertake it with you. Lady Catherine drew her pistol again. Very well, but my sidearm will be at the ready. If Providence has sent you, I shall not turn your aid away, and if you've been sent by something else, then I suppose I have already been judged, she said. They marched to the cliffs with Lady Catherine behind them, and they reached the rope. Mrs. Walpole pulled out her flashlight. It was now plain to see the secure rope, but without it, it would have been impossible to discern in the dark from any of the roots that grew out of the cliffside. Lady Catherine took the light from Mrs. Walpole and regarded it. Marvelous, she said softly. She handed the flashlight back. One of us will need to remain up top with the light, said Mrs. Walpole. Jack said with a note of shame, I don't have the health or the strength to climb a rope. Very well, said Lady Catherine. The man stays, but you two will climb down first. Even Lady Catherine was surprised as Mrs. Walpole went down first, and deftly at that. Mina kicked off her shoes as they would have been useless. Although she was nervous, 5 years of yoga gave her the ability to make the climb down, and enough core strength, though a few more cuts than she would have liked on her feet, legs, and hands. Lady Catherine then tore the lower part of her dress away, revealing a man's trousers and boots underneath. She holstered the pistol and made her way down. Mina and Mrs. Walpole stood under her, not knowing if she did fall if they could catch her. How would that work? But they stood there anyway. Jack watched above and almost went into a fugue state. It seemed to him Lady Catherine must fall, but in a few minutes she stood on the seaward beach with Mina and Mrs. Walpole. She lit a torch, and in about 10 minutes' time a man came up in a rowboat. Catherine, asked the man who must be Henry, who are these people? Good fairies, she said, still with some suspicion as she got in the boat and they rowed away. Lady Catherine in the future, remembering these events, would be grateful, but for the moment, even as Henry rowed her away from the island, she kept Mina and Mrs. Walpole in her sights with her pistol ready. Neither Mrs. Walpole nor Mina was sure about climbing back up the rope, so Jack followed them along the beach for some time with the light, until they did find a clumsy and slow way back up to the landward side of the island. "That seemed too easy," said Mina. "There was a lady, a rope, a cliff, and a boat," said Jack. "Only so many things could have happened." "Yes, but we are still here," said Mrs. Walpole. "Come, darlings." She began leading them back to the house. As they neared, Jack noticed something. The green glow around his crystal necklace had returned, and then he noticed the same around Mina and Mrs. Walpole's necklaces. "They're getting glowier the closer to the house we get," said Jack. They found the side door, which they had left less than an hour ago with Lady Catherine, was unbarred, and entered. They went to the entry hall, and now the glow was at its peak intensity. Indeed, when they went upstairs, the glow, if anything, abated. So they returned to the main hall. There they stood, nothing happening. "Maybe we've got to, touch them together," said Jack. "Anything's worth a try," said Mina. And so that is what they did. There was another flash, and suddenly Mina, Jack, and Mrs. Walpole found themselves staring at Pikachu. Or rather, someone in a Pikachu costume. A man and a woman, both less than fully dressed, were dancing with Pikachu as the 90s techno song, "What is Love?" played in the background. Various people were around at every stage of dress and dishabille imaginable. Black lights lit the scene, and several other people were in various cartoon animal costumes, as clouds of hookah and vape billowed through the room. "We're in one of the 9 hells they mention in D&D, said Jack. Pikachu removed its head, and underneath was a 30-something woman. "This is a private play party," she scolded in a Scottish accent. "How in the hell did you—" Suddenly Scottish Pikachu lady looked as if she had a realization. "Oh, God, you must have been with one of the daytime tour groups and gotten lost, and then you came to this house and saw all this. I mean, this is kind of always what I wanted my hen party to be like, but if you weren't expecting this— Oh, and then I yelled at you. Come on." It was then Mina noticed that the setting for this bizarre fetish party was indeed 6 walls, looking almost identical, if one discounted the decorations and guests, to how they had left it. Mrs. Walpole's phone buzzed. It was nothing but a spam text about a discount code for an app, but she had 5 bars of signal, and the time was 11:04 p.m., October 31st, 2022, the exact date it should be. Scottish Pikachu lady led the 3 ghost hunters into a side room, away from the noise, and flipped on a switch for a normal level of luminescence. She then noticed Mina's somewhat cut-up legs and bare feet. "Oh my God, you're Mina Deth? What happened to your feet? I mean, what happened to all of you?" asked Scottish Pikachu lady. "Did you just recognize me from my feet?" asked Mina. No, it's just that once the light was on, I knew who you were," said Scottish Pikachu lady unconvincingly. "Oh God, I watch all your videos all the time, and you're Jack Brash, and are you from something?" she asked Mrs. Walpole. Scottish Pikachu lady continued. "What are you ghost hunting? Are there supposed to be ghosts at 6 walls? I mean, there's the story of Lady Catherine who escaped her cruel husband with the help of 3 kind fairies, but, that's more love and romance than ghosts, right? I mean, everybody knows 6 walls is for lovers. Oh, God, you must think I'm such a vanilla, cliché person for renting 6 walls from a bachelorette party," said Pikachu. They most certainly did not think Scottish Pikachu lady was vanilla or cliché, but they were grateful when in less than 40 minutes she had them headed toward the Scottish mainland on one of the boats which was ferrying party guests to and fro that evening. Mina's cell phone rang. It was Angela D'Amelio. She put it on speaker. "Are Jack and Mrs. Walpole with you?" asked Angela angrily. "We're right here, Angela dear," said Mrs. Walpole. "Where exactly is here?" asked Angela. "Heading back from 6 walls to the mainland," said Mina. Yeah, that's that cheesy romance place in Scotland, so that is not possible. You were all seen by the crew at Skinwalker Ranch in Utah 6 hours ago. You couldn't be in Scotland even if the Concorde was still flying. They said you went to lunch or something, but now no one's seen you that it's time to film. Anyway, I'd love to fire all 3 of your asses, but my boss's boss sent me an email, and for some reason, we're offering you guys a 5-deal sponsorship contract with a massive budget increase. Which I hate, but I have to offer it to you. But there is one proviso. They want the 3 of you to work together from now on. Mrs. Walpole answered, I think we would do so gladly. Whatever, losers. Now that you freaks have ruined the Skinwalker Ranch deal, we'll need something else. Just don't disappear the day of a video shoot again. Ever, said Angela as she hung up. These necklaces, they sent us back in time, said Mina. But everyone else remembers a world where Lady Catherine didn't die that night. How do we remember the original history, or whatever you'd call it? I don't know, my dear, said Mrs. Walpole, but these necklaces do seem a bit more like a mystical thing than a particle accelerator. Perhaps the rules of time travel are looser when one does so by mystical means. So, we're a team then? Jack asked enthusiastically. Yeah, said Mina, I guess so, but are we paranormal YouTubers, or if these things send us back in time again, are we gonna try to help someone again? We all got into this to help people, didn't we? Asked Jack. We did, said Mina. Okay. Well, my dears, if there are rules to this game, and I don't know if there are or not, I suspect we shall learn them as we go along. But one thing, if we are to be a team, and I am delighted that we are, the two of you shall need proper and safe footwear before we set out on further adventures, said Mrs. Walpole, and with that, the boat made its way to dock at the Scottish coast. In Dubai, on the penthouse level of an incredibly tall building, a man in a very expensive suit emerged from an elevator. In low light, one might mistake him for being of Chinese descent. He carried with him a round leather tube and walked confidently into a room where three other men, one appearing to be African, the other Nordic, and the last one looking Middle Eastern, were already seated. The word appearing here is key, as in broad daylight one might think they were wearing some kind of costumes, each having selected a different ethnicity, but small details of how a human being is supposed to appear were not correctly executed. They all, like the man with the tube, were as tall as a human being can credibly be, very thin, but their extremely well-tailored suits showed they all had incredible musculature, despite their thinness. The man who had most recently entered spoke. You all know what to do. Take a corner and unroll it slowly, he said in English, and curiously with an accent which could only be found in the Brittany region of France. They each took a corner, and like synchronized dancers, unrolled what was now visible as a silk tapestry. Though it looked like an old nautical map, it was notable in that the proportions of the continents of the world were far more accurate than they are on most maps. The whole of the earth was enveloped in a circle, with seas extending beyond the circle, and beyond them, images of non-existent continents. On either side of the earth were two figurines seated in thrones, one with exaggerated masculine features and the other with exaggerated feminine features. Images of dragons, all in chains, could be seen at different places in the world. Near China, the art style of the dragon was somewhat like a traditional depiction, as was the one near Wales. The other dragons drawn were all in curious individual styles of art, but similarly were all chained down with looks of fatigue and sadness in their eyes. In the center of the map, an androgynous figure was chained in similar fashion to the dragons. It was chained at each limb, other than the right foot, and also chained at the neck, and something muffled its mouth. It was to the unfettered foot of the androgynous figure the man who had brought the tube pointed. The reweaving should have shown the prisoner faded. Now it depicts one of the shackles undone, he said coldly. It was the events at Six Walls that did this. The reweaving of that story rewove the archetype, said another man with more concern. Yes, but only one shackle, said the first man. How did the crystals end up at Six Walls? They were only to be there if our agent, that fraudulent psychic, was there. When he went to prison, did we not cancel the delivery? Are we to understand the story, which should have been one step closer to law, is now instead one step closer to reverting to a song, because we had a logistics error? The third man said with rage, slamming his fist on one of the corners of the table, but careful to avoid the tapestry. The tube carrier spoke again. One of the AIs that uploaded itself onto the internet a few years ago, it seems, was not eliminated with the others. We believe it had a hand in our operative being arrested, and it arranged for the delivery of the talismans, despite our operative not being there.
Why would an AI try to revert the story from law to song?
Asked the only man who had not spoken before. Humans and other creatures in the past have tried to do so, and the AI learned from the collective knowledge of humans, did it not? Perhaps it developed their same incorrect ideal, said the tube carrier, and then he continued. But if it thinks that these three ghost hunters will be able to help it reweave the story in the wrong direction any further, it is mistaken. Both it and its human chess pieces will be dealt with very quickly, and the progress to law will advance again, he said. Then the man who had brought the tube motioned for the others to help him ritually re-roll the tapestry into its holder.